Hello, my front-end friend. In this video, we're going to be looking at how we can take a field and add some hints for the user to see while they're filling it out before they get down to hitting that submit button. And we have to worry about things like server-side validation. We want to make sure they've already done it correctly so they don't run into any issues. So we're going to look at how we can add these little required things without actually having to manually do it for each one of them. We're going to give some hints where if a user's filled out something, it can change color depending if they've done it correctly or not. And we can even add a little bit more. So here you can see there's like a little bit of an explanation of what they need for their password. And when we go in that, it gets a little bit brighter so they can see it. And as they're filling out their password, once they get it correct, we get the little check mark that fills out. And if it's not correct, it animates away. And if they leave, they get a little red thing with the shaking animation. But if they've done it correctly, and then it gives us back our check mark and we can keep on going with our submission. And then they know that they've done it correctly. So we're just trying to provide all of these hints before, again, the user gets to getting to the submit here. And all of this is done with just a little bit of CSS. That's not even that complicated. So jumping on over here, we can get into the code of all of this. And if you'd like to follow along, this starting code is provided. So you can follow along from here. You'll have the starting code and finish code available if you want to check either one of them out. And basically, I just have these form groups here with a label and an input on each one of them. And importantly for these is all of them do have this required that's on there. And we'll talk a little bit more about the password one too, because there's a little bit more going on with the password. And we also have this hint that's coming down over here for our hint that we're including there, which is our text right underneath that. There is some CSS done, obviously, at this point already. You can come and look at it. It's mostly just general stylings. There's nothing too important specific to this video because I want to allow you to use this however you want to use it and in your own thing. So style things up how you want, and then we can just add this layer on top to provide this extra information. And the very first thing we're going to do is where we have these required fields, we want to make sure that users know they're actually required. And we're going to do a little bit of modern CSS for this one because I want to make sure that that required is getting added with the label and not part of the input, but it is the input that has it. And there's two different approaches you could do here. This would be a little bit easier if my input was inside the label, which you're allowed to do. If we did it that way, we wouldn't have to use the has selector, but with how we have it set up now, we will. So we'll come right here. I'm going to say that if we have a label that has, and then what we can do is we can check what the sibling after it is. So we could just say has plus, and let's just put input, because then we know it's going to get everything. And we can just say that the background is purple, and I'm going to throw an important on there just to make sure that it actually changes. And we can see the label background on each one of those has changed. I was thinking the form field. I don't think I needed the important on there. Yeah, we can see that the label for each one of them has changed because every one of them has an input that is directly after it. So the adjacent sibling is the input. This is the adjacent sibling combinator with the plus there. I don't want to look if there's an input after it though. I want to look if there is an input that has the required attribute. So we can do that. We're just going to copy that to speed things up a little bit. I'm going to replace that with that, but then I'm also going to put that inside of square brackets, which is our attribute selector. So now if a label has an element that is directly after it that has the required attribute on there, it gets the purple background. All three of them do. So it's working. And just to double check, we can remove the required attribute from the name and we'll see that one goes away. So I'll put that back because I want all of them to be required. And then what we can do is select the pseudo element of that one. So I can say my after of my label, and I don't want the background to be purple, so we'll get rid of that. We're going to come in with a content. The content in this case will be the star. So often we'll leave content blank, but in this case, I do want to come in with the star because that's the little symbol we want. And I'm going to include a space in here because if you put spaces there, they will show up here just so it's not touching. If you'd rather the star comes before it, you could just put this as a before, but usually I think the star comes after because that looks a little bit weird, right? That would mess up your alignment and other things. So we'll stick with our after right there. And then the only other thing is to change the color of it. And in this case, I have some custom properties set up, as I mentioned with my styling here. So if you want to use the same colors as me, if you're following along, you can just check the naming of them. In this case, I want my error state. So we can just come here and say color, error, and like that, we get the little red star coming after each one of them. So this is nice and easy, a little bit of CSS to ensure that our fields are obviously required. Now, from an accessibility standpoint, we can actually provide alt text for the content here, but in this case, I don't want to because if an element has the required attribute on there, the screen reader is already going to announce that it's required. So I wouldn't want to provide alt text that's then repeating that again. So we're just going to leave that like this, and we can keep on going from here. Now, the next thing we want to do is if a user has put some stuff in a field, we want to verify or let them know if they've got it correct or not. This is only using colors, and it's a little bit dangerous to only use colors for validation type things or hints, because users can be colorblind, and there's actually quite a lot of users do have some form of color blindness. But in this case, I think it's okay to provide it as like a subtle hint, because we will get validation also when somebody hits submit here. So we'll see that as well as we go through this. But let's come and start with this, where I'm going to do an input. And we're going to use something that's a little bit newer, which is user valid. And with that there, I'm just going to take my color that I have here, but instead of a color, I'm going to do this as an outline color. And I'm using outlines on these. If you're using a border, you could always change your border color instead, whatever works depending on how your fields are set up. And I don't want the error. I want a color of success that I have right there. Again, use whatever color you have on your field. And what's really cool about this user valid is if I come into a field and then leave a field, like nothing's happening. And this is technically valid right now, but it waits until the user's interacted with it and then leaves the field before it provides the input here. So it doesn't do it too early, which if we were just using the regular valid or invalid, that would actually happen and it would be a little bit annoying. So most of the time these days, I would actually suggest if you are using valid and invalid, you probably actually want to use user valid or user invalid. Though there are a few exceptions, then we'll be looking at some of those a little bit when we get down to the hint down here. So we can do the same thing. Let's just copy you and paste that right here. And we're going to do a user invalid. And then we can say that this is our color warning right there. So not warning, we want this to be our error because it's invalid what they've done. And once again, that means if they come in and they leave, nothing happens. It waits until the user's interacted with the field. So if they put something and they leave that's not a valid email address, then they get the warning color that shows up on there, or the error color that shows up on there. But if they come in and put in a valid email address, now we can see that it is giving us the valid color showing up on there, which is exactly what we want. So that's perfect. Those two are working. And just to show you now, as I said with the other one, if I have it invalid and say someone does have color blindness, when they do get to the submit here, it is going to say, please include the @ for a valid email address, because I am using the type of email on here. And this is why it knows that it's for even the color with the user valid and user invalid, what's happening with these. The one thing that's important is the name. As long as there's any input, this will be considered valid. But I would say that you don't want to set any settings or anything on there. Someone might put a. You could set a minimum number of characters, but for names, I would really suggest against that. And for email, generally the type of email is fine. It does mean something like this is valid. So you could use a pattern to make sure there's a dot followed by at least 2 characters. So if you were good with regex, you can go ahead and do that just to add a little bit of extra validation here if you'd like. I'm just going to reset my field. This is in CodePen, so if I just change my HTML, it refreshes the page for us. So we're back to our starting state. And the next thing we want to do is come down here, and we're going to do the simple thing first, which is changing the color down here, and then we'll get to the SVG part, which we're going to do completely by hand, but it's a nice simple one. And by doing it by hand, I find for simple things, it also makes it easier to animate because you understand all the pieces that are there. And we're not going to do anything too complicated with it. So let's start by changing the color of the hint down here. So just when they come in here, it gets a little bit brighter, make sure that they're actually reading it. So here's my regular hint styling where I've just used a color on my text. I'm just going to change the color of the text. Alternatively, you could lower the opacity here and then use something that would increase the opacity of it. And for this, I'm not going to use the user valid or invalid. We're just going to do an input with a focus state on there. And then we're going to say plus.hint. So if there is a hint that is immediately after an input with a focus on it, we'll select it. And we can just change the color of that. And I'm going to say color primary, and we're going to go with 900 right there, which is a brighter color, closer to white that I have. So if the user is focused in there, you can see we go up closer to white, and then when we leave, it goes back to the more faded out color that we had before. Another option you could do as well, this depends on if you'd want to do this or not, and there's a few different ways you could do it, but we do also have the option of saying input of user valid plus.hint, and we could change the styling of the hint once the user's filled something out if what they've put is valid. I wouldn't necessarily suggest this, but it is an option. So we could come here and say that, say visibility, and then we could come here and say that it becomes hidden. So then if the user comes in here and they're filling it out and they meet the minimum requirements, once they're finished interacting with it, we could hide the hint. The problem is with you could do a visibility none as well, or not visibility none, a display of none, but then you would actually shift your layout a little bit, which could be kind of awkward. And now we're leaving the big empty space. Plus, if a user wants to make a change and all of a sudden, I don't know, if they make a change, I mean, it comes back if it's invalid, but for me, it's a little bit strange, but maybe you can think of a way that it would work for you. Or if your hint is being provided in a different way, there's an option that you have there, but I'll leave this commented out for the finished code. So it's up to you to decide on how you want to use that. And as far as how this is working just with the 12 characters that contain at least one special character like a symbol, as I said, for that, what we're doing is we're using a pattern here, where this is using regex, and this regex is checking to make sure that we have, first we have a min length, and the min length is making sure we have at least 12 characters. That's the easy way to do it. This can be any 12 characters though, and I wanted to make sure there was at least one special character in there. So this is checking through everything and making sure there's at least a special character. And that does mean that if somebody comes in and they don't fill it out properly, and let's put in a valid email address here and a valid name, and they hit submit, they will please match the requested format. And the problem with this is always that it doesn't tell you what the requested format is, which is why it's nice to have something here that's visible to the user and not something that's just as like placeholder text. Because if it's invalid and it's placeholder text, if they have anything here, they won't see it. So don't provide the hints as placeholder text. Do actually make them visible to the user to know why they're doing it. And ideally, you do show this, and I know this is up to the designer more often than not, but even have a conversation with them because it's so much better UX. I'm sure you've done it where you've filled out a form and only after you hit submit, you find out what the requirements for it are. It'd be really nice to know what the requirements are as you're filling out the field, especially for passwords where it can get really annoying when they only tell you after that you need 6 special characters or something for some stupid reason. But you get the idea. And so anyway, that is, that's how that's working with our pattern there with this regex that's coming in here. This is not server-side validation. This is just sort of client-side first layer. You still want to do client-side validation for all of this, but it's nice that we can sort of set a few things along the way before they get there. And before the form actually submits and before we have to bother doing some server-side validation, which you definitely still want to be doing. Now it's time to work on adding the SVG here, because as much as like having some form of validation before the user gets there, having these little micro interactions and things like that, you can just add that extra touch to your site. Plus it's fun to learn how we can do these types of things as well. And so we're going to come, actually, if you're following along with my actual code here, the first thing we're going to do is I did set up this hint to use some grid template columns. For now, I'm going to turn that off because if it is sort of get in the way, and then we'll turn it back on to actually get the layout here to work correctly. But we're going to turn that off for the moment just by commenting those 2 lines out right there, which shouldn't change anything for the time being. And let's then come into our hint that we have right here, and we're just going to come in with an SVG like that, and I'm going to come down here and close that SVG. Anytime you write an SVG by hand, I would recommend setting the view box, and usually you see this anyway, but a 0, 0, 100, 100. And if you don't know SVGs very well, or you haven't used them or created them before, the SVGs are an infinite canvas, and the view box is our view, like the window into that infinite canvas. So we're basically telling it we're starting at the 0, 0 point and going to the 100, 100. So we have a square that's basically 100 pixels big, is how to think of it. It's not really pixels big though. It's like within the infinite canvas, our area. And the reason it's good to do 100, 100 when you're writing it by hand is it just makes all the numbers you work with really easy to work with because you're basing it on 100. So everything, it's like a percentage basically. How much of my box do I want to fill up? 50 would be 50% of it. So it just makes it really easy to work that way. And the other thing I am going to do on this SVG, which we don't need, but I am going to add a class here of just hint indicator just to make it easier to select, though I could just select, my hint SVG if you want to go that way. And the first thing we're going to do is create our circle. I realize we have this giant space here that we're working with right now. But this will, as I said, once we get to the layout part, once our circle is in place, then we'll fix our layout so it's a lot smaller, but we'll keep it big for the beginning. And the reason it's so big is just SVGs by default tend to be, I don't remember, there is a default size that is quite large. So we're going to come in here, and if you need a circle, it's nice and easy because you just say circle, and I'm using a self-closing tag here at the end because there's nothing that goes in our circle. It is sort of like a replaced element, I guess, but it's an SVG, so it's a bit different. I don't know. I don't know if it's considered a replaced element or not, but it's just its own thing, right? So we can give that a class of circle because we're going to want to select that a little bit later on. And just I'm going to put these on different lines just to make it a little bit easier to, keep everything in the screen at once, because I don't like having word wrap on. I find it very awkward. So we're going to start with a few different properties here, or attributes, I should say. We're going to say a CX of 50 and a CY is equal to 50. And what this is it's our center on the x-axis and the center on the y-axis, which means 50 and 50 because we have the view box of 100, 100, and that means that we're dead in the middle. Again, the reason that I like working with 100 here, and that you usually see people working with 100 when they're writing SVGs by hand like this. Then we can come in here and say R, which is our radius, I'm going to go with 45, so just a little bit smaller. And we'll see, but hey, look at that. We have a circle. Awesome. And if we did 50, we could come in and actually fill up the entire thing then. And I guess we could keep 50 there, just fill up the entire circle. And we'll adjust that if we need to, because I'm not sure if we're going to be adding a stroke, and I don't remember, but it's possible the stroke goes on the outside. But we'll leave it at 50, and if our stroke isn't working properly, then we'll adjust. And I'm going to say that the fill, for now, we're going to do a fill that's going to be white. We're going to change this a little bit, but we will get a white fill on there just to show you we can do that. And we are going to come in with a stroke. Let's come on. We'll keep these properties here. Then we'll come on to a new line down here. So we have our fill and our stroke that we can add. So for the stroke, let's come in just with red for now. I wish it was like stroke color or something, but we just have stroke like that. You can see our red is coming in. And then let's come in with our stroke width and come in with whatever number you want it to be. We'll come in with a 10 for now, but you can change that to what you need it to be. That's what I thought. If we go with our stroke, it's half of the stroke goes on the inside and half of the stroke goes on the outside as the default. There's probably a way to change that, but that's at least how it works by default. So here we can see that we're losing it a little bit. So if we reduce this down now to 45 as our radius, we have 5 on that side, 5 on the other, and now that's actually filling up the entire thing. So we can leave it just like that and keep on going from here. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to shrink this down just so we can see everything we're doing here. And I'm going to be using custom properties for the stroke color and the stroke width here, and the fill as well, actually. So for let's start with the fill, and we're going to come in, as I said, with a custom property, and we're going to say hint circle fill. And I just spelled that. I always spell circle wrong. There we go. Hint circle fill. Now it is going to black, like you can see right now. And the reason this is going to black is because hint circle fill isn't defined anywhere. And because it's not defined anywhere, it just goes to its default color, which is black. And I don't want that to happen. If there's nothing defined for this one, I actually want it to not have a fill. So then I can say none, in which case it becomes transparent. And it's a little bit hard to see the difference there, but just because it's dark either way. But you should be able to see now it's black. And if we put the none back, now it's gone and it's back to what we have there. And we'll see it more with the stroke here, because we're going to take the same approach for what we're doing here, where we're going to come in with a var, and we can say this is our hint circle stroke. And for this, if we don't supply anything at all, there is no default stroke color on something. So the entire thing has vanished, but we want to come in and we want to have a color. And I'm actually just going to use the current color like this. And by using current color, it's going to take the color of my text for wherever my SVG is, which is perfect. And I guess this could actually, we could do that. And we could come and put this on its own line as well for our circle here. So we now just have a stroke going on the outside like that, which is perfect. Exactly what we want right there. And that's going to enable us to change the colors of it a little bit. So let's come in and do that with a little bit of CSS before we add our check mark in here. So now what we could do is we could come in and let's come right here and say that if we have an input that is user invalid, and then we have our dot plus hint, on the hint, and this is why I like using custom properties for this, is because we want to change the color of the circle, but we're also going to want to play with our check mark and do other things here. And the advantage with this is we can set the custom properties on the hint here, and that's going to cascade down into the SVG that we have because that's inside of the hint, and it's just going to make our life a little bit easier. So if I say that my hint circle fill is my var, this is invalid, so we're going to use our error color right here, and that means that's my fill, and we can also say that our hint circle stroke is the same thing, color error. So we're just going to get a solid red thing if it's invalid. So if we come in here, and right now it's invalid, so if I leave, the entire thing switches over to our red color that we have, and then if we hit a valid state, it switches back. So it's only if we have a user invalid that we're going to get that red color coming in on there to say, wait, stop, there's a problem going on. Obviously, it's really in our face. It's really big right now. We'll be fixing that as we go through, but we're going to keep it big again because it highlights a little bit more of what's happening. Now, of course, we could do the same thing for when it's valid. So let's just copy this and we can come right here and say this is when it's user valid. And in this case, we want both of this error state here and this error here to get switched out for our success. So we end up with a green one, but we'll also have the check mark that comes in afterwards. The problem now is, as we're filling this out, again, it's looking for the user valid, which means I have to leave the field before it comes in. And it would be nice just to get the validation. As we're doing it, we get the little check mark that comes in and it changes to green as the user's typing in here. So for that, what we could do is just add another selector here, which is our input, that is focused, that is valid. And this isn't using the user valid, we're using the regular valid here. And we have our plus dot hint here as well. So if the user's currently focused in and what they're entering is valid, we've hit the valid state, but they're still in the field, or if they leave the field. So this is handling both while they're in the field and after they've left the field, then it will work. So if we're in here, we're entering stuff, and then I enter a number, now it's come in and it's working. And I just realized I'm not only, my regex pattern isn't only looking for special characters, it's looking for any character, like any regular characters, and a number would be considered valid. I'm not sure. Let's just try that again. Oh, it's only looking for numbers. I have to update that. So my regex isn't perfect for exactly what we have here. I do apologize. Maybe we'll update that to say numbers, but you could update your regex to look for special characters instead. I just realized as I was typing that out, so I do apologize. But we'll stick with going on this one right now. Okay, everything's working. Let's get rid of that big red square that we have right now and come in with our check mark that's going to come in there now. Now, for the check mark, it's a little bit more difficult to create because we're just going to come in with a regular path. And so that's the end there. We're going to come in, it's a path. And once again, the path will be self-closing. And we'll do a class is equal to check mark. So we're able to play around with this a little bit, check mark. And the reason this is a little bit funkier to play around with is just, we'll see, because we're going to come in here with a D, and D is basically allows us to like draw around. And so the first thing we're going to start with is an M, and M is move. So basically we have like, we're going to go to a point, right? So move to a specific point. So we're going to say, I'm going to go to the 30, 50, and this has just been a little bit of trial and error on my part to be able to get this to look decent. So it does take some playing around. But yeah, we're moving to the 30 and 50 coordinates, and you can put spaces here as well. Either one will work fine. So we're moving to 30 to 50. And from there, then what we want to do is draw a line. So I'm going to say L. So we're drawing a line from 3050 to 4565. And let's just get so we can actually see this. So once again, we're going to do a stroke is going to be equal. Let's just come in with white for now so we can see it. And we'll come in with a stroke width is equal to 10 pixels, something like that. So we can actually see what we're doing. And you can see we've started here and we've gone down because we're going from 30 to 45. And we've gone across because we're going from 50 to 65. So we're coming down a little bit. Then from here, we want to go up that way. So I'm just going to do another line, and we're going to do a 70, 35 for this one. And that's going to shoot us up that way. And we get that coming in. You can actually see there's some black in there. I don't know if you can actually see it, but actually we can come in here and fill this out to make it valid. You can see there's the black coming in. So the other thing we're going to want to do on this is just make sure the fill is equal to none, because that's just going to be really ugly if we have a fill showing up in there. So now by doing that, we can see that we don't have the fill. We only have the stroke coming in. We're never going to want to fill on this, so we can just leave our fill alone like that. The other thing with this check mark, I mean, you could make it bigger. You could play with these numbers a little bit, right? Like if you, that would move it across and, play around with it however you want to be able to make things look the way you do. But I'm happy with how this one looks. It's a little check mark. Whoops. There we go. We're back. I thought I completely broke it. But yeah, if you want to try and make things bigger, play around with the numbers a little bit, by all means, you can go for it. But one thing we can actually do to improve this, or at least in my own opinion, is we can come in with a stroke line cap, and we can do round on there. And what that will do is actually make the ends of it round, which I think looks a little bit nicer, except when you have round here and round here, but then the bottom of it has that point, it looks kind of weird, right? So there's one other thing. So that's the cap. So if you have a stroke, like the end of the caps will be round. But if we have two lines like these that are connected, we can also target those. So we're going to say here, we're going to do a stroke and it's line join, and that can also be round. And it will automatically round off that bottom part there, and it just looks a little bit friendlier and nicer, at least in my own opinion. So I like that. And now we have that coming in. That's awesome. We want to take the same approach that we did before, where we want the color of it to be controlled by what we're doing. So here where we have the stroke, oh, I didn't do a stroke. Oh, the stroke, yeah. I was looking for stroke color. I said, I wish I was called that. So we're going to do a var of hint check mark, comma, current color. So by default, it will match the color of our box. I don't know if we're ever really going to use that, but it's there if we do need it. I could make it transparent too, I guess, but the current color will work fine for what we're doing. So that means currently, if we do this, and then we have our white check mark coming in, because again, the current color is looking at the text color of our field right now. So if we leave, it actually is going to change color, which I don't particularly like, but we're going to change the color of it anyway as we go through. And I'm wondering now if we need the fallback, but we'll do it this way because it's sort of how we're approaching everything. And there's one more thing, because we are going to animate this in and out depending on the state we're in. We don't always want it visible, obviously. And I was going to do that a bit after, but I think it makes sense to actually do that now, because we definitely don't want to see it right now when we're in our red state. We only want the check mark to appear when we're not there. So to be able to do that, we're going to come right here, and I'm going to do another stroke property. So it's stroke, and it's called dash array. And we're going to say is equal to 80. And the way dash array makes like dashes out of what you have. So we could say this is like 10, and you're going to see it's going to make these dashes, and you can add spaces between these as well. So we have like 10, and then there's this, it goes into the next dash, and then 10, and it goes into the next dash, and so on. So it looks kind of funky when we do it like this. And basically for a check mark like this, we just want it to line up for the whole thing. And now my dash is actually a bit too short. So I found 80 worked well for me just to take the whole thing. It might be a little bit too long, but I'd rather be too long than too short for what I set it as. So I'm going to go with 80 for that. And the reason I'm doing the dash array like that is because we have another thing. And actually, let's bring this down to like a 30 or a 10, because I think it'd make it more obvious what's happening here. We're going to come in with a stroke dash offset is going to be equal to 10 as well. And both of these numbers will get changed. But you can see I've actually pushed it over a little bit now. Let's make that 20. And it's going to push it even further. And we're sort of like playing around with the positioning of where things are getting offset from. So here, actually, the offset 5. We want this to be generally smaller. So like 5, or if I go up to a 0 here, again, it just sort of pushes things along the SVG path a little bit is how we can see it. So 0, it's actually starting at the 0. If I make that 5, we're offsetting it by 5. So it's offset by 5, and we're only seeing 5 of it here. It's kind of weird how it works, but you can definitely play around with it a little bit. But as I said, my 80 here worked well for me. And if I do an 80 there and I do an 80 here, what will happen is we're not actually going to see it. We're pushing it all the way off. So I want this number to actually change. So we are going to come in with a var of check mark offset, and we'll do a comma 80. So the default is that the offset means it's completely vanished. And I think it's, when I say, I was saying pushed off one way, it's actually getting like reverse pushed off. So it's floating off where we can't see it right now in a way. And then what we're going to do is we want to update that offset when we're in that valid state. So here, when we get to this point right here, we can come in and say that our hint And I just want to make sure we get it right. It was just it wasn't the hint. I just called it checkmark offset. So we can do our checkmark offset. I probably should have called it hint checkmark offset. But we're just going to come in here with A0. And let's see if this works, where if I come in here and I get it valid, then it comes in, and if it's invalid, it's not actually there anymore. So that's the beginning of it, where we have these two different states, again, valid, invalid. So it's either at 80 or 0. 0 means it's visible, 80 means we've pushed it all the way off. The other thing that I want to do is when we're here, it's perfect because we can't see it. When we can see it, I also want to change the color of it because I find it's not very visible right now. So I'm going to say that was just our, it was hint. I did hint for that one. We're going to change the other one to check mark. Here where we can say it's our var, and I just want to put my background color, primary 100, which again, I probably could have set as a default because I don't think we ever see it when it's the current color. But now if we come in and it's valid, it's just a little bit clearer to see in higher contrast. So let's come here and fix this. So we just, for consistency's sake, have a hint everywhere. And I'll paste that in here as well. So hint checkmark offset, hint checkmark, there we go. And with that, we want to actually animate this in, right? We want to transition it. And it's really easy to do that. So let's just come here. We have this, our hint, and we'll come down here just because we're going to do our hint indicator. And on the hint indicator, we're going to set a size on this eventually. But first, let's just worry about the animation. So for that, we had two different things. We have my check mark here, and we have the circle. And so what we can say is, I'm going to use nesting. If you'd prefer not to use nesting, you don't have to, but this is part of modern CSS now. We're able to do nesting. So this is the hint indicator placeholder. So I'm saying hint indicator, the direct child that is a circle, got to spell it right. We do a transition, and we can transition our stroke. So we can say 0.5 seconds, and we can transition our fill for 0.5 seconds. And that means now when we fill it out, you can see it actually transitions over and transitions back instead of being that really rough transition we had. Like before, it wasn't rough, it was switching. Now we get a transition happening instead, which looks a little bit nicer. The other thing with the transition is if we go to here and we go out, it will fade to the red again instead of just instantly switching. I think it looks just a little bit nicer. And as you might have guessed, if we can do that, that also means that we can select our check mark that's inside of here. And I can transition, and on this one, what we want to do is our stroke dash offset. And again, 0.5 seconds makes sense. So now if we come in and we start writing, and once it's valid, it draws in the offset, which I think is kind of cool. And if we go the other way, it will draw out. So nice, super simple. I think it looks really nice doing that. You can always like change the timing function or whatever if you want something, or do something a little bit fancier if you'd like. And again, if we go to the red, it will transition out and transition back in that way as well. So I think that looks pretty good. And actually the white here, when it goes out, it's up to you if you want to keep the white or if you just always want it to be the dark color. I'll let you decide on that one. Again, you'd probably have your own colors and stuff if you're doing this on your own fields anyway. The last thing we're going to do now is get it lined up down here instead of being this giant checkbox like we have right now. And to be able to do that, I was using grid. You could definitely use flexbox here as well on your hint. But I ended up using grid. So I'm going to come and turn that back on. That was right here, display of grid. And basically by doing it this way, I just found it a little bit easier than using flexbox because with flexbox, things can squish, and especially the SVGs like to squish down to nothing because of the flex shrink. And then you have to select them and tell them not to shrink and other things like that. So by using grid, I can say an auto and a 1FR. And when I do that, it's actually shrinking that down to 0 because I don't have a defined size on the hint indicator here. So we are right now are falling into that same problem of transition or squishing down to 0. But what we can do is come back to that hint indicator here and just give it a height. And if I give it a height, we're going to say 1ch. And we might change that character. But you can actually see it's come in there. I can see that indicator right there. And it's a little bit small. I'm going to zoom in on this just to make it a bit bigger so we can see it. And we might change our stroke size to make it a little bit matching our font a bit more. But 1ch is characters wide. So my height is based on the width of a character, which is a bit weird. And this is a unit we've had for a really long time. But what we can do instead of using the ch unit now is we can do things that are based on the height of things. And because it's next to a capital letter, I think it would make sense to come in with 1 cap. And now that should actually match the height of my M perfectly, which is pretty cool. Or it might be slightly off just because of the way cap works. And sometimes letters will extend a little bit past the natural cap height, but I think with an M, it will basically match. If you did have a lowercase letter, you also have the X option, and one X will be a little bit harder to see, but let's like put something in there. So you can see it's a little bit smaller now. Whereas if we do one cap, it will match. And X is lowercase characters, cap is, as you know, more obvious, it's the uppercase characters right there. So one cap I think works really well for that. But I do think that when we had nothing, let's just reset our, I'm going to make a change up in my HTML to reset the code pen. And I am going to come in here and let's zoom back out because it's really big right now to look at our code. But we can come in and where we had our stroke here, we did a stroke width of 10. I might come in with a 12 just to make it a little bit thicker to try and match the size of the font. And I think that looks a little bit better. I am going to zoom in just because I want to make sure it's not getting cropped off at all on the sides, because it might be a little bit, but we can't really see. But as we saw, like if this is 12, maybe I want to reduce this down. So instead of 45, that would actually be just a 44 now, I think would actually make it work, right? Because then, yeah, I think that's perfect, exactly what we want. Because remember, this is half on the inside, half on the outside. So we have 6 extra. So this gives us that 6 of extra space that we want right there. And so we can zoom back out and we can see that it looks pretty good. And now when I come in and I fill this out, when it's valid, it should come in. We get our little checkbox, lets the user know they're good. But if they want to keep going, of course, they can make a more complicated password. If you know, no harm in that. And when they leave, we get the nice green box on there. And if we, for some reason, go down, it will switch over to being red. There's one last thing, though, that could just really help hammer home that there's a problem here and make sure they're actually reading the hint, which is just to do a subtle little animation when that happens. So I've created a very subtle shake animation keyframe, or not animation, but the keyframes for our animation right here, where I'm just translating it by 2 pixels at the 50% point, which means shift over and then shift back. And so to be able to use this, let's go find where we had that user invalid that we had. So right here, if it's user invalid, so once they've left the field, because you don't want to shake while they're currently typing, we want to make sure it's only once they think they've gotten something good, we can just come in here and say that we're going to do an animation and do our subtle shake. Let's say 200 milliseconds and linear for this one, but we wouldn't want to do it only one time probably, because say we come in, like that's really subtle if it's only once, and it will only run the first time. So, but I think that's enough to like grab people's attention. So let's just do that again. Like that's not quite enough, but what we can do is actually tell it to repeat multiple times. So if I come and put a 3 here, we're going to repeat the animation 3 times. So let's just do something, leave, and see, we get a little wiggle. So it's just grabbing the user's attention without being overly annoying and just making sure they're looking at it. I think that looks pretty good personally. And I guess we could even come in here and on that chain, like make sure the color here too is our var color primary 100, just to make sure that when it's invalid, right, the person comes in, they leave, it's not valid, and I did the wrong color. I wanted the 900 here. We're matching our background color by doing the 100. And there we go. It just stays white, making sure it's a bit easier to read. So we could include that in there as well. And one thing I'll say again for accessibility reasons is there is a prefers reduced motion. I wouldn't include this in a prefers reduced motion because prefers reduced motion is for larger scale motion most of the time. In this case, it's a very subtle little thing. It's just to draw your attention. Micro animations like that are completely fine to include, even if somebody prefers reduced motion, because reduced motion doesn't mean zero motion. So with that, yeah, I think it's looking pretty good. I think we learned a lot of fun things along the way there. I hope you really enjoyed this video. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.